11. Teddy decided to not give Kate much thought and discarded her as being a distraction, since he had yet to meet her. The more he avoided the passages of the trade scrolls, the more he became consumed by the Master Scroll. He studied the Master Scroll every chance he had, after memorizing the trade scroll's prophetic verses, reasoning with himself,
"If I remember the details, then I will be able to seize the moments that matter. Carpe diem. But if I attain the power of a master, then I can control the outcome."
Living by his own code of nobility, he wore an invisible crown with pride. Having the ability to follow through and get shit done was a trait no one could refute about him. Teddy laid in bed at night and thought about the things he truly loved. He really had no idea. Being tied to the curse of the hybrid eclipse did not allow him to experience true love or his romantic ideas of love. After many nights, the amount of anxiety building up in him became unbearable, and he finally made the decision to go ahead and add his name to the Master Scroll and find out. After school, he began to pop into Claire's shop to see if she was there, thinking about scenarios where he could be alone with the Master Scroll long enough to cut his finger and sign it without anyone knowing what happened.
Should I break in and steal the scroll? Can I take it home with me without Claire knowing it's missing? What happens if something weird occurs afterwards? What if I physically change? Will there be fireworks?
He chuckles to himself. Teddy began tracking Claire's every movement and watched her from the monitors Thomas used to keep an eye on the world. He noticed she left for the bank on Thursdays, clocking her at approximately 15 to 20 minutes away when she traveled by foot. Normally, he was busy with wrestling or martial arts after school on Thursdays, but he concocted the perfect opportunity to be alone with the Master Scroll. He could not sleep and stayed awake all night planning the best way to execute his plan. While weighing the pros and cons of adding his name to the Master Scroll, something comes over him and he tells himself,
I want more.
That morning, with laser-like focus and precision, Teddy hopped onto his skateboard and dodged any plans with friends to cut out early. Making his way to Claire's, he knocked at the back door of her shop. She was usually open for business, but today she was about to leave for the bank.
Teddy, what are you doing here? I don't usually see you until tomorrow. Are you okay?
She questions. He kicked up his skateboard to catch it in the air and began to execute his plan.
I have this dumb report due tomorrow, and I need to check some resources out before I go to practice tonight.
Sure, come on in and help yourself. I have to run a quick errand, but I will be back in a half hour. Would you be so kind to not answer the door if anyone should stop by?
She requests.
I can do that,
he replies as he ducks into the back room full of antique books. The light bulb hanging from the ceiling began to flicker. Claire noticed something strange about how the light was flickering.
Lights flickering? That means spirits are near.
Her instincts are warning her to pay attention. She looked around, but nothing really seemed out of the norm other than Teddy. He grabbed some thick books and slammed them down on the study table, pretending to look through them while he watched Claire leave. The door closed shut and Teddy's heart began to race. He hesitated to make the climb up the ladder and snatch the Master Scroll from its sacred placement. Looking over his shoulder, he tells himself,
If I just take the scroll from the box, I can hide it from Claire in my backpack, if she comes back sooner than later.
He quickly unrolled the Master Scroll to see the hexagonal pattern of liquid glow. Like he had seen several times before, the images on the Master Scroll shape-shifted to glistening sunlight on the waters, which captivated his attention. Studying the bold iridescent words on the Master Scroll that stood out like a bright neon sign, Master of, then the blank space that followed, waited for him to take further action. Teddy took in a deep breath and grabbed something from his pocket. It was the black obsidian arrowhead that Kate gave him long ago. He could not remember where he got it, but it was his favorite talisman. He chipped away at the edges of the stone to make it sharp, so it would cut like glass to be used for its original purpose. He knew he might have to explain the cut he was about to make, so he sliced between the sides of his fingers. The blood pooled up into his cupped hand, and he quickly dipped his finger into the blood and wrote in the blank space in cursive, "The universe." Teddy began to get lightheaded, like he had lost a large amount of blood. There was a sudden pull on his body to lean over the Master Scroll, where he collapsed and lost consciousness. Meanwhile, Claire was on her way back from the bank, and she felt a gust of wind whoosh past her. Her heart sank. Instantly, she intuitively knew what Teddy had done, and she started to run back to her place. Quickly unlocking the front door, she walked toward the back to see Teddy turning off the back room light. He smiles at her and says,
I think I got what I needed. I'll finish up the rest when I get home tonight.
While rushing out the back door, she sighs and says,
Okay, funny guy. Give your dad a hug for me, would ya?
Will do. See you later.
He says and waves by with his arm up in the air. Teddy walked away beaming with happiness. He felt good, like he was the master of the universe. Claire closed her eyes and picked up the phone to call Thomas. Now, the Master Scroll signers held power based on the succession principle, where each master to sign took precedence in power along with their bloodline and affiliates. The masters received benefits in trade by way of prosperity, which some people perceived as luck. The current holder of the Master Scroll controlled, influenced, and could add knowledge to the trade scrolls. Teddy was now able to manipulate trade at will, and this power made him damn near invincible. If he decided he wanted a specific domain to prosper, he was able to influence it by speaking the outcome into existence. For example, he might say,
More sugar.
as he pours sugar into his coffee, and the price of production of sugar would increase overnight. The darkness found in people could easily twist the intent and use of the Master Scroll, which sole purpose of existence was to bring prosperity, happiness, and freedom to the holder and their people. Dark masters of the past always wanted more by trying to enhance their powerful influence with additional magic. They tried to use older archaic methods, such as human or animal sacrifice, to influence outcomes. Perhaps they did not believe in themselves or the powers given to them by the Master Scroll. Dark masters continued to defy the Master Scroll's purpose, which was to free people, and instead chose to enslave others. The Master Scroll's sacrifice required the signer to face the ultimate test, to sacrifice that which they love. How they responded to that loss ultimately influenced their future as a master. And there was an instance where the master chose to sacrifice themselves because of their unconditional love for humanity. Thomas was spending a lot of time on the phone and meeting with people to make arrangements for the end of his life. He found out his kidneys were failing and cancer was spreading throughout his body. His efforts to heal and stay alive turned out to be futile due to his love of alcohol. Knowing his fate, he continued to drink. Teddy also began to drink and party at insane levels, coping with the pressure to play the game and deal with the denial that Thomas was not going to be around for much longer. The thought of being alone once he graduated from high school and turning 18 both scared and devastated him. Teddy never really felt physically alone. Despite his efforts to get rid of annoying people, he kept himself company by monitoring people and collecting intelligence for the gods. Being a master gave him access to large accounts of information only spies and large agencies could dream of. Teddy grew into his emperor-like stature with his new gifts, but he still had to fulfill the calling of the gods. On Thomas's deathbed, Teddy asks him,
How will I know when I fulfill my purpose? How will I know when it's time to meet her?
As the tears fill his eyes and roll down his face, feeling helpless with all of his power, he was having a hard time holding back his emotions in front of Thomas and choked up. Thomas, who is on the pulse of everything, tells Teddy,
Don't worry. I've left you all of my files to reference once I'm gone. I'm going to tell you something really important right now. It looks as if the gods are smiling upon us today. She is here. Listen to me, boy. You need to handle Kate with care.
Teddy's face lights up with excitement.
What? Where? Here? In the city?
He asks with a smile, a bittersweet way of avoiding the sadness he felt in his heart. Thomas points to a monitor with a view of the city and Claire's shop and says,
Right there.
Sure enough, Kate walked by the camera with a look of awe and excitement of being in the city. Teddy could not believe it. He lunged toward the monitor to get a closer look.
Keep your eye on her, my boy. Do not drop the ball on this one.
Thomas advises Teddy. Teddy did not know whether keep an eye on her meant to protect her or because he could not trust her. Either way, he remained dazed and confused about her. He was extremely nervous to see her in the flesh. Thomas could not be happier than to see his boy amused. He tells him,
Go ahead, I'll be fine.
With a satisfied smile. Teddy bolted out the door and ran into the city to see his mystery girl. Thomas learned about Kate's bloodline being linked to the first master of the Master Scroll, the master of everything, when he had been visited earlier that year by the creators of the trade scrolls, the insects. They explained to him her bloodline's relation to the trade scrolls, and they did not want him to intervene or influence the way Teddy and Kate would meet. Thomas knew the insects would have come through to make this moment happen the way that it did. Aware of Teddy's new power, Thomas felt the way he had trained Teddy would help him figure out how to handle both the trade scroll prophecy and the curse of the hybrid eclipse. Thomas did not make it into the night, and the gods mourned his death. They could not decide what to do with Teddy, their demigod, who had yet to earn god status. Truth be told, Thomas could have been Teddy's father, and not some schmuck who abused his mother and him as an infant. Teddy never became complacent. Despite Thomas being a merciless god, he loved all of his children, flaws and all. Thomas was proud of his son, Teddy, and referred to him as
a goddamn warrior and champion.
Thomas knew Teddy was destined for excellence. Despite the unnatural evil influence, Thomas pushed Teddy to be the best, and Kate was to be the seed of love that kept him fighting for the greater good. Thomas's final mission on this dimension had been completed. On to the next. Some time after Thomas had passed away, Teddy was in his room reading an ancient spellbook. He was learning how to manipulate and control the weather, listening to I Wanna Be Sedated by the Ramones at max volume. He enjoyed annoying the rest of the house with his music. His entire universe had been smashed into pieces as he learned what it meant to lose something he loved, Thomas. His view of love was now skewed and put into reverse. His idea of love turned into a hatred, out of a fear of losing that too. His sense of family left him, and he wondered if he would ever have one, a family. He made a point to focus on studying only the dark arts, specifically chaos magic, by way of meaningless sex. Teddy mastered his dark powers by the age of 19, while quickly flipping through a geographic map of the world to locate a specific longitude and latitude coordinates. He points
There.
And energetically sends a lightning bolt to the location. His powers could be described as erratic, wild, and destructive, with no consideration for the receiving end of said energetic transfers. He also figured out how to quantum teleport information by shapeshifting. He could be in two places at one time. This was done through the domination and manipulation of people, animals, and small insect vessels. He could control and remote view from afar. Having access to the gods' counterintelligence, secrets of the ghouls, and their ability to live in two realms at one time helped him further his goals. The ghouls' use of dark sorcery influenced his desire to continue mastering dark magic. Motivated by the idea that he might be able to access other realms to see or talk with Thomas, he attempted to channel him using ghoulish rituals. His efforts to access other realms were consistently blocked because of his rather large ego and his inability to become fluid with the ethers. These were the prerequisites needed to communicate with the other world where Thomas resided to look after him. As prophesied by the trade scrolls, Thomas was able to communicate with the living from the other world, but it would not be with Teddy. 12. Kate grew up on Rusty's small farm in Paramount, walking for miles to visit the closest neighbor to see if any children could play with her. To her disappointment, when she found children to play with, their parents would tell their children they could not play with her. Sometimes she would have the door slammed in her face. Wiping the tears from her cheeks as she walked home, she remained hopeful since she had so many animals on the farm to play with. She considered them her friends and was able to communicate with them. She had her own Charlotte's Web thing going on with the horses, cows, chickens, dogs, cats, mice, birds, rabbits, goats, ducks, geese, and the occasional snake. Being around the animals on the farm gave her hives and rashes, and she shrugged off the itchy feeling. She continued to play with them, often hugging them goodbye. A reoccurring theme in her life was the challenge to love that which harmed her, either directly or indirectly. As Kate got older, she felt like she was alone. She was consistently told she was different and did not belong. Her family loved her and told her not to worry if people were mean to her, telling her,
"Those mean people are just jealous of you."
She wonders,
why would anyone be jealous of me? They're just telling me that so I feel better.
Overhearing people whisper things like,
Ugh, she looks dirty.
And
isn't she the one that lives on that funny farm with all the animals?
The angels did a good job of making her feel like she was nothing and isolated her for existing. Rusty had a lot of resources, land, and was extremely wealthy. He lived a modest life and presented himself as being poor. He did not like the idea of having fake company and could care less about people misjudging him. He was a visionary, full of secrets and privileged knowledge of the gods and their trade secrets. His lineage came from royalty. Thomas knew his kind, despite dealing with discrimination from ignorant people, and how Rusty spoiled his family with the best of everything. When Rusty looked after Kate, he surprised her with animals. He gave her rare animals like an Samani rooster and a buckskin stallion to play with. The average person would have overlooked them as just animals and missed their rare pedigree. Kate's mother, Jackie, enjoyed taking her for rides on the stallion while visiting their properties. When Kate was not on the farm with her mother, she was with her father's family. They attended sporting events, hosted poker nights, and frequented the horse races and casinos for entertainment. As pioneers in the trade business in the North, going back to New Orleans, the family knew a lot of people. She listened to the talk of the town and learned how to read people. She learned how to play card games, appreciate sports, and what to look for in talented players. She enjoyed listening to people talk about poker and sporting events. It seemed like competition was where all of the excitement came from, and even though she was her grandfather's good luck charm, she got kicked out from watching high-stakes poker games. She was most comfortable being around strangers who were more concerned about playing the game than those who self-loathed on themselves and sat in the corner sneering at her. She knew a winner and a loser when she saw one. Kate's entire family belonged to a very old religion. On the weekends, she enjoyed going to church with her grandparents, not because going to Mass was fun, but because they would get ice cream after the service. Ariadne, Kate's grandmother, taught her to be modest. Her family was protective of her and tried to keep her away from people they thought might hurt her. Sheltering her was a double-edged sword. Because she was already isolated, she bubbled with untapped potential, and the containment of that energy drove her mad. When she did allow herself to shine, adults would either enjoy her company or turn their nose up at her for having too much energy, curiosity, and charm. Kate experienced adversity from day one and did not stand a chance of living a normal life. The angels had doomed her life and kept her in a state of mediocrity. Despite all of her efforts to excel and achieve, she was told time and time again she was not good enough by the angels. On a daily basis, she was reminded that she did not fit into society and that she was a real ugly duckling. As she strived to become better and work more efficiently, Her ideas and methods were stolen from her. She never received credit for finding a better way to accomplish twice as much as the angels. Her friendships were short-lived, unless she followed along and acted like an angel, with a little a. Strong in mind, she knew these relationships were false, and she had no desire to pretend to be something that made her feel awful and gave her anxiety. She confided in her family for support and as a source of strength. Year after year, from elementary to junior high school, if there was a problem, Kate was blamed for it. If an example needed to be made, the angels would find a way to use her as their poster child of what not to do. Eventually, she decided to make as many friends as possible, but accepted the idea that those friendships would not last for long. She became friends with those who were bullied, the outcasts, and the troublemakers, because they were the most diverse and interesting, like her. Surrounding herself with a handful of people who were like her, the creative geniuses, the people who were passed over, those who were told they are nothing special and just like everyone else. But she knew they were special, often taking the heat off of her friends when they got into trouble because she knew she was already on someone's shit list. She tells herself,
Go ahead and add it to the pile.
having someone else blame her for all of their problems was just another cloudy day on her block. She knew what it felt like to be treated badly, so she stood up for those who were weaker than her. The gods loved this trait in her, along with many others, and they decided they wanted to see more. They pushed her beyond her comfortable boundaries by throwing down obstacles and challenges in front of her to see if she would break. The angels despised Kate's beauty, and they worried she would eventually marry someone who would take her away from their gigantic research lab, created to monitor and oppress her. They spun so many rumors about her life. A half-truth they repeatedly spread was the idea that if anyone got close to her, they would die, especially her husband. Technically, this was not a lie, since everyone eventually dies, but they still put that half-truth out there. The notion of marrying Kate gave a new meaning to the saying, dead man walking. The rumors succeeded in keeping her alone and isolated. They also say things like,
I bet she has an STD from all of the guys she sleeps with.
Oh, my friend banged the shit out of her last weekend.
or
She looks cheap and is probably a stripper.
they said anything to make her seem unappealing, and continued to tell everyone she was evil. Kate's temperament had always been balanced and reserved. She reserved that judgment of most people unless they were blatantly rude to her face, in which she did not hold back her sarcastic comments. One of the special gifts bestowed upon her by the insects was the ability to see people for how they saw her. If they thought she were pretty, nice, cool, or sexy, she mirrored those traits in that person. Her ability to physically see their projections helped her find friends. She saw a lot of evil among the angels and hate among the ghouls and tried to avoid them. Kate came across as the girl next door, combined with an I'm with the band kind of vibe. Dark, mysterious clouds followed her as she walked toward the sunshine. Heavily protected in all of the realms and dimensions, she made abnormal her normal. Shifts in the shadows and light were part of her daily life. She could see the spirits in the other realms moving through mirrors. She could see where the realms shifted beyond archways, between the trees, and through circular windows, which looked like portals blurring at the ethers. She noticed how the insects shapeshifted, how the angels attempted to mimic the gods, and how the gaudy ghouls carried the sweet stench of death with them. The angels treated her like she was invisible as they passed by. The ghouls smelled so bad that she would practically run from them, especially when they didn't try to mask their scent with heavy perfumes and colognes. She didn't seem to mind being around the gods' arrogance because she liked their competitive nature. The normal people went about their lives oblivious to the multiple realms and supernatural beings present in their daily lives. She learned how to manage her perception of what may be seen as fantasy from reality. She tried to contain her laughs and gasps of the random things she would see. For example, when a spirit from the other world stuck their tongue out at an angel while they looked into the mirror to fix their face. She learned how to read the room for an appropriate reaction. Rusty and Teddy were the only other people she knew who could also see the unseen. She never forgot Teddy after all those years, and she longed for a friend like him. Kate quickly learned how to dodge bullies in junior high and high school. By the time she reached high school, she was forced to make the decision of either fighting her way to class to learn or avoid school and get into trouble with her father. He did not take her skipping school lightly, encouraging her to live a bold life, and that is what she did. She could be found maneuvering through the school hallways, slipping in and out of her classrooms to grab her homework assignments, skipping out of school early to avoid specific people. She would later meet up and go to parties with friends. Kate found academic coursework easy. Her father taught her how to use logic to solve real-world problems. She secretly wished she could sit in the classroom, unbothered by the bullies who were waiting for her to leave class. She knew she was missing out on a lot of really good information taught by her teachers, yet she struggled to stay in school after being told,
"You will never amount to anything.
You're not doing it right. You're a flake.
You're a con artist.
and
You can't hang out with us.
And then when she was officially rejected from participating in school activities with the old response as to why she wasn't included,
It's politics.
and even though she was up to her neck in obstacles, she strived to do her best, but she would never be enough unless she became an angel. All was not terrible for Kate. She eventually figured out how to succeed in her own way. The gods sent in people to help guide her in her studies. For example, teachers would slip her copies of books about mythology. She never understood why random books would be given to her. Some teachers encouraged her to try out for sports like tennis and wanted her to join the track team. She was too busy trying to survive high school to think about being a part of after-school activities. The idea of having a set schedule where she could be followed and bullied made being consistent in her schedule impossible. She brushed off their kind gestures as a distraction from her need to keep moving. Listening and dancing to Been Caught Stealing by Jane's Addiction while getting ready for school, Kate looked into the mirror to put the finishing touches on her hair, eyeliner, and lip gloss. She tells herself,
If I never slow down, how will they ever be able to corner me?
it wasn't a matter of how, but when they would corner her, as she had experienced many times before. The angels gave Kate anxiety in school, and the thought of succumbing to their rituals scared her. In her mind, living as an angel would be a slow, painful death of having to jump through meaningless hoops to get nowhere. Driven by the concept of death and being half-daughter to a king of the underworld, she carefully made her life decisions by envisioning each scenario until the end. If the ending of a situation did not look great to her, she would leave and never look back. Angel's tactics slowly shifted from,
If we can't ignore her and make her unappealing, then we will create the illusion that she is one of us by taking photos of her, making it look like she is converted.
Her spiritual team made the angels' motives very clear to her, as she had zero desire to have anything to do with them. 13. From a young age, Kate would talk to her family about the concept of death. Her family shared their wisdom by sharing stories as a favorite way to pass time. They worried about her fixation with stories about death. She had vivid nightmares of horrendous images, like pools of blood and severed limbs. As a child, she watched horror movies like Friday the 13th on repeat. Subconsciously, she was trying to overcome her fears, threatened every day by random people, staring her down as if she did not belong. She turned to horror movies to help her face her fears. This also left her with low, vibrational images of darkness. She became desensitized to violence toward people while remaining empathetic toward animals. Kate's prophetic dreams or visions of God and demons took her to places she had never been before. The insects awakened her ability to see beyond the veil, to peer into one dimension to the next, which helped her travel while in her sleep. Kate continued to have dreams of God and horrific nightmares. Sometimes she remembered the memories of her dreams better than her memory while being awake. A reoccurring dream played often in her mind, like a cartoon, where she is running down a road to a chapel on a hill. The sky is black and she can see a large white bull with raging eyes and smoke coming from its nose, scanning the horizon to look for her. Running towards her from afar, she runs into the church and hides under a pew. Letting out a grunt, the bull rips the face of the building off with its horns. It begins to charge the pews and throws them from side to side, making its way to the pew she is hiding under. Curled up, paralyzed by fear, she waits for the bull to reach her. As the bull throws her pew to the side, it stares down at her with its red eyes, and she wakes up. The terror Kate experienced by some of her dreams made her want to seek out knowledge of both the light and the dark. She had to look deep within to find a balance of the two. She found growth studying different philosophies, learning about Zen principles, meditation, psychology, self-improvement, mythos, scientific theories, and concepts. She eventually found a place of peace and contentment from both the darkness of the underworld and the light of the other world. While Kate was learning about the good and evil realms surrounding her, Teddy was practicing chaos magic and learned how to open and enter portals from alternate dimensions. One day, while Kate was driving her car, she drove through one of the portals opened by Teddy. He made several attempts to locate and remote view her. As she drove through the intersection, she entered momentarily into a paradox shift of another dimension. Teddy saw a trolley passing by and pushed his energy to see if he could make her appear on the trolley. She came out the other side of the portal after seeing a red trolley pass through her car and hearing a loud pop. She stopped and looked down the road to see if she had been in some sort of accident. There was not a car or person in sight for miles. She shook her head in confusion. Teddy had just succeeded in his attempt to reach out and transport her to him through another dimension. He drops the book he is holding and shouts,
"Holy fucking shit. I did it. I almost killed her, but I did it. Note to self, traveling objects may disappear."
Completely stunned, he realized just how close he was to altering and controlling the fabric of space and time. Kate's death instincts continued to guide her and reflected in her lifestyle choices. She continued to watch horror movies for the shock factor. She felt the best way to rid herself of any angels knocking on her door would be to do the things they would not be caught dead doing, like watching R-rated movies, drinking alcohol, or having caffeinated drinks. Her idea of living on the edge was considered normal to people outside of her insulated bubble. Kate also loved listening to music, even though the songs were censored. She snuck into clubs to go dancing, shopped new trends at the mall, watched pickup games of basketball at the park with her family, and hung out with her risk-taking friends. Kate calls
"Shotgun."
As all of her friends jump into their car, she reached for the radio dial and turned up the song "Come Out and Play" by Offspring. They all start singing at the top of their lungs.
"If you're under 18, you won't be doing any time. Hey, come out and play."
Kate played the air drums. Kate and her friend partook in dangerous activities like doing car donuts in empty parking lots, throwing friends in the trunk of the car to fishtail down dirt roads, bungee jumping, jumping off bridges into rivers when trains approached, cliff diving near spillways, and sneaking into bars. They smuggled alcohol into school to make special Slurpees from 7-Eleven, smoked Christmas and Kind Buds, dropped Lucky Charms during school and Purple Dragon at raves, and ate psychedelic shrooms on pizza on Blockbuster Video weekends. On the flip side, by the time Kate was ready to graduate, she joined the debate team and learned how to argue with merit. After signing up for the yearbook staff, she was assigned to take photos, write and edit the football pages. She participated in FBLA, DECA, and ran the school store, scoring extremely high on her exams, even though she never attended class for more than a couple of days in a row to avoid shakedowns by the jealous bullies. The loads of community service she incurred was just another injustice she felt she had to deal with to get around the problem. Kate's sexual history was questionable and fell somewhere between falling in love with the idea of being in love and experimenting with a hot guy. Like most girls her age, heartbreak was inevitable, and it led her to have a love them and leave them first mentality. She acted like she didn't want to have a serious relationship, but secretly she did. Later, she dated her high school sweetheart, Casey. Despite having a boyfriend, the Angels continued their whisper campaign that she was a slut, which was far from the truth. She was kind to the nice guys that gave her attention, and bitchy to the creeps that gave her unwanted attention. Their true colors were up front and center as she reflected their thoughts of her back onto them. As a sophomore, the older guys took interest in Kate and circled her like sharks. Some of the girls noticed their boyfriends checking her out and did not like her. She started talking to Casey, the captain of the football team, in the morning before class. One day on his way to meet up with her, he found her curled up into a ball on the floor, surrounded by a bunch of girls kicking and pulling at her hair. They scream at her.
You think you're better than us, bitch?
Casey was so angry, he pulls each girl off of her one by one and tells them,
"Leave her alone."
He held out his hand to her and pulled her up from the ground. Putting his letterman's jacket around her, he led her away to class. The rest of the year, she was left alone by the bullies and no longer had to deal with the fear of going to school. Kate and Casey fell in love with each other. He was her official high school sweetheart and first love. On the weekends and after school, they hung out on the couch watching TV, went to the movies, walked through the parks, ate ice cream and other delicious foods, shopped and went to dances together. He was older than her. He was stocky with dark hair and had green eyes. She thought he was the cutest guy in school, and so did the other girls. Once Casey graduated from high school, he moved away to attend college. Kate tried to keep their relationship together, but distance, time, and opportunity to date other people began to deteriorate any future she envisioned of them being together. She experienced heartbreak and betrayal for the first time with him. Her friends told her he had been secretly hooking up with her best friend. She swears to herself,
I will never trust anyone again, ever.
Kate leaned on Casey while in school to protect her from the Angels. She continued to hold on to their relationship and spent time with him when he came home from school to visit. He was familiar to her and she still loved him. She also wanted to forget what her friends had told her, but she eventually cut ties with him by the time she left high school. She finally came to terms with the truth that their ship had finally sunk. Driving home from his place on campus, she turned on the song End of the Road by Boyz II Men and started to cry. As high school came to an end, Kate made several attempts to get away and escape Paramount. She found herself being dragged back down and forced to make choices that required her to stay. While driving home at dusk, she looked into her rearview mirror and noticed flashing police car lights following her. She turned down the song Who Am I by Snoop Dogg playing on her new Kenwood stereo. The Angels did whatever it took to give her a bad reputation, and her driving record consisted of chicken shit violations, like not having a front license plate on her car or having dim lights on while driving at dusk. Whenever Kate found herself in trouble, her family was there as a huge support system. They seemed to understand her and were open to listening to her shenanigans without judgment. As she got older, she noticed how her family was also judged by the angels, and this made her sad. She knew there was more to life than living in evil Paramount. Kate dreamt of leaving Paramount to become a movie star. Entertainment was in her blood, but the angels made sure she never saw the spotlight by never giving her a chance to succeed and ruining her reputation. Rusty's sacred heartists went out of their way to secretly meet with her. She was given a job to work behind the scenes on movie sets and met people who belonged to the sacred heartists. The network of entertainers she met were well versed in the history of both the curse of the hybrid eclipse and the trade scroll prophecy. The sacred heartists had the distinct tattoo of flames engulfing a heart somewhere on their body. The gods gave this exclusive group the task of creating and guiding the divine chosen via the direction and creation of magic in movies and music. They were Kate's North Star, capturing the zeitgeist or the spirit of the times to send messages to the isolated and oppressed. Succeeding in their mission, she turned to music, movies, and TV as her source of strength and inspiration during adverse times. The sacred heartists adored Kate, and they invited her to join them. However, her confidence and worth had been affected so bad by the angels telling her she was unlovable, unworthy, and ugly, this filled her with doubt that she was indeed not good enough. They knew she needed to be grounded to move into the industry. They respected her choice to decline and continued to watch her from afar. When she left her temporary position of working on set, they told her not to
fall back into the woodwork.
The angels continued to move in quickly and told anyone Kate met with, including the sacred heartists, that she was talking shit about them. She had no idea the angels were telling lies to paint her in a false light. This made her look inconsistent, two-faced, and left those who did like her confused and hurt after thinking how kind and authentic she was to them. The angels played down her opportunities as her being a jack of all trades, unable to maintain relationships or keep a job. When she did excel at work, they would fire her for not converting and told her she was not a good organizational fit. Kate began to internalize those barriers, the ones the angels had set before her, as her own. Over time, they conditioned her to lay low as a kind of learned helplessness, when in reality, she could go anywhere she wanted. At any time or moment, she could have gone her own way and done well, striving to overcome negative thoughts. There was this nagging feeling in her gut that entertainment was where she belonged, that being stuck in Paramount would not be the end of her story. She knew there was more to learn outside of Paramount and that she needed to find a way to see beyond their veil and stay optimistic about her future. The world outside called to her every day. There was something outside of the bubble that needed her energy. She had no responsibilities, so she decided to travel and visit her Aunt Eva, who lived in the city. Fate was calling out to her. The gods were paying attention to Kate at this time and asked some of the sacred heartists to make sacrifices in their careers to assist her. Subconsciously, she knew they were helping her. Unaware of her natural charm and beauty, her energy was 100% pure authenticity, and people could not get enough of it. Approaching people and things like an explorer, she was consistently filled with amazement. Some viewed her kindness as being naive or weak, but she was just oblivious to the cruel world around her. The insects made her this way by giving her a gift on the day of her birth and surgeries. They short-circuited her short-term memory, sending her memories directly to her long-term memory. Those memories were stored away and were able to be retrieved later. They wanted to make sure she did not remember the pain she would endure as it occurred. This was done to prevent trauma and make her resilient. The insects were highly evolved and able to make this happen with the tap of their finger onto the pineal gland. Every day, Kate woke up without memory from the day before, as her memory reset upon going into a deep REM sleep. Her ability to think about thinking, or metacognition, was her saving grace. She was able to teach herself how to help herself by looking from the outside in. For example, she figured out how to complete simple tasks by making lists and vision boards. This made her both efficient and productive. As for the memories of the special people she spent time with, she used music as a catalyst to tap into her emotions to recall them. With music, she could recall events as if she were present with that person, experiencing the same time and same space all over again. The spirit guides taught her how to live in eternal space, a timelessness where a minute lasts an hour a year a lifetime. She experienced music on a different level. She could envision how music felt, like she was writing sound and vibration with Nikola Tesla, and experiencing space and time with Albert Einstein. Her internal world was vibrant, extraordinary, and magical. 14. Kate shared her creative world with her family and spent a lot of time with them dreaming. Her cousins went to the same school as her, and they had a lot of the same friends. They roamed around Paramount, getting into trouble. After she graduated from high school, she asked her cousin Colin if he wanted to go to the city with her and visit her aunt, Ava. Kate sat in the airport with Colin, waiting to board their plane. While listening to All Eyes on Me by Tupac on her headphones, she zoned out and began to reflect back to a time when they were teens hanging out at the mall. While checking out all of the new and unique stuff in the stores, they came across a small kiosk with military recruits. Colin wanted to grab some of the free swag they had sitting on their table. Kate didn't care about the free stuff, but she noticed how kind the recruits were to her. She reminds herself,
nothing is ever free. They are probably just being nice to us because they want something.
However, the recruiters did remind her of her grandfather's friends, the way they carried and presented themselves with respect while serving others. Colin began to chat with them about the military. Kate mentioned that her grandfather, Rusty Jones, also served in the military. When she mentions his name, the two men look at each other and then ask her,
"Hey, would you like us to make you some dog tags?"
She was excited. They offered to make something for her. She says,
"Yeah, sure."
One of the recruiters asks her,
"What's your name? How do you want to spell it?"
She replies,
Katejaques.
The other recruiter asks her,
"What do you want to put on it? You know, how do you want people to remember you?"
She had never thought about her life this way. Shrugging her shoulders, she says,
The best? Yeah, the best.
And laughs. She waited for them to laugh, but they did not laugh. They went on making her tags, looking rather serious. Quickly dusting off her tags, they say,
"Here you go."
She remembers holding the tags in her hands and thinking,
The best? What a dumb thing to say and put on dog tags. I could have thought of something better.
Colin also had tags made, but he would not let Kate see what he had put on them. He was a little bit jealous of her and reminded her that the only reason why he spent time with her was because his mom made him. She adored her cousin and thought he was fun to hang out with until he started being a jerk. Often forgetting the mean things people said to her, she came across as being a forgiving person. It was not that she inherently forgave others, but she literally could not remember what they did or said to her. At least, not right away. Kate and Colin's plane arrived to the city, and they made their way to baggage claim. Grabbing their bags from the carousel, they scooted through the airport to meet Aunt Ava, who was sitting outside in her vehicle. She was happy she was able to spend time with her aunt. Ava was a cool lady and always did something fun. She told them they could drive her new convertible Ford Mustang around the city while they visited. Colin was also very adventurous compared to Kate's reserved personality. She appreciated his spontaneous nature, which pulled her out of isolation. He was always ready to explore all of the places they probably shouldn't go. He never took no as an answer from Kate. His mission on this trip was to find E, or ecstasy, the new designer drug on the market. She tells him,
Okay, as long as we get to do some shopping.
Ava tells the both of them,
Go ahead, I'll be at work for the next couple days, but I still want to take you to a few places. There's a couple of places I'd like to check out on my days off.
Aunt Ava was like an older sister to Kate. Being in the city was a real treat for her, where she could experience an environment different from the unnatural world of Paramount. Like Rusty, Kate enjoyed everything about the city. She felt like she was in a magical wonderland where she could shop and play in the streets, laugh, and be her authentic self without fear of judgment. She lit up with joy as she explored the beautiful scenery. The gods were watching her every move, and they were amazed how she gravitated to Claire's bookshop without any nudges or assistance. This moment had been predicted as part of her journey and destiny. Drawn to the store's energy, she was captivated by the aisles of old books, scrolls, and other magical items, like crystals. She had this feeling like she was meant to be there. Colin was more interested in the rear entrance of the store. He headed out the back door, down the alleyway, and disappeared. Kate had a fear of lingering in stores. She was constantly followed in Paramount while shopping. She was treated like she was going to steal something and got annoyed when people treated her like a thief for no reason. She felt like she was always seen as suspicious. She could buy anything she wanted, and the notion of her stealing was an insult to her integrity. Her vice would always be fire, and she gravitated toward all of the candles lit in the store, lingering long enough to admire the flames. She could sense a strange force upon her, almost like it was telling her to stay put. She began to feel uneasy because not only did she lose track of Colin on his quest to find party drugs, but she wasn't sure if she should wait there for him, buy something, or leave the store and go back to her aunt's place. She pauses for a moment and thinks to herself,
Oh great, Colin is gone. How is he going to get back?
Claire knew it was Kate that was in her store, and what that meant. Kate in the city, in her store, staring at her face to face, was like death had made its way to its final destination. Claire's emotions were all over the place. She was sad, mad, and glad, all at the same time. There was nothing she could do to stop fate, and she knew what was about to happen to Thomas. Kate paced while she waited for Colin to come back to the shop.
Anytime soon,
she sighs, not knowing whether he had bailed on her or if he had gone back to her aunt's place on his own. Looking down, she picked up a stone from a basket in the aisle. She flipped the stone over and it had the word power etched into it. Being the rock collector she was, she thought about buying the stone, but was terrified of the look that the woman standing behind the counter was giving her. Reluctantly, she tried to put the stone back down. Apprehensive to leave the stone, there was this pull like a magnet for it to stay in her hand. The magnetism of the stone sticking to her hand freaked her out. She gave her hand a firm shake, and the stone landed back into the basket with a clack. She clasped her hand and decided to exit the back door of the store to go look for Colin. In her panic, she turned the corner and smacked right into Teddy. Standing face to face, they awkwardly slow danced from side to side. Playing in the background of the store's ambiance was the song Crash Into Me by Dave Matthews Band. Teddy was out of breath from running and skating as fast as he could through the city to get a glimpse of Kate. He says,
"Oh, sorry,"
while tucking his board underneath his arm, but she didn't seem to notice him as she skipped down the steps to see if she could find Colin. He could not take his eyes off of her. Immediately, he noticed the worry on her forehead and the look in her big brown eyes. He thinks,
"She could be one of the most beautiful girls I've ever seen."
He glances at Claire and mouths,
"Is that?"
while pointing at Kate. She nodded as tears rolled down her face. Claire knew the moment Teddy and Kate met, this meant that destiny had been fulfilled and that Thomas had passed away. Teddy asks Claire,
"Why are you crying?"
She utters,
"She's a lot like me,"
and hands him the power stone.
This is her lot, Teddy.
She began to sob as she walked to the front of the store and turned over the close sign in the window. He was confused by what she was saying and ran out the door to chase Kate. In the back of his mind, he knew Claire was not wrong. She was a visionary, a goddess, and had been a muse to the gods for a really long time. As Thomas was assigned to be in Claire's life for a lifetime, so was it that Teddy was supposed to be with Kate for a lifetime. He can hear Claire's voice as he rushes down the stairs with his thoughts racing.
You will not marry her, but you will be inspired by your great love for her to do great things.
Kate's loving energy was rare and had Teddy following her throughout the city. As he got closer, he slowed down to casually observe her. At the end of an alleyway, he gripped onto the stone Claire gave him and could feel a familiar energy pulsating in his hand. His mind shifts to Thomas.
I should be with him.
His avoidance of the pain and emotion of Thomas being sick had him fixated on following Kate through the city streets instead. She was alone and looked lost. He wanted to talk with her so bad, and it took all of his self-control to let her go. He felt the need to make a perfect plan first before he approached her. He did not want to screw up all he had been trained for by saying or doing something stupid. Kate reminded him of a firefly. She was radiant and bounced around from place to place. With a twinkle in her eyes and a brilliant luminescent smile, he found her smell intoxicating. Feeling in sync with this magical and enchanting creature, he admired her from afar. She was totally clueless to his presence. Kate sees Colin across the way, walking toward her with a big smile on his face.
Where have you been? I almost left you,
she exclaims. He continues to smirk.
I was looking for E.
Rolling her eyes.
We better get back, so we can go to dinner. I'm driving.
Teddy continued to observe the both of them from the shadows as they got into her aunt's car and drove away. 15. Teddy jumped onto his Nokia phone and began to assemble a small army to watch Kate's every move while she was in the city. People all over the city began looking at their phones while the ringtone jingle bells sounded off. The gods were already watching her every move, in which he had access to their data. He preferred to use his own sources. Thomas and Claire taught Teddy everything he needed to know about the Trade Scrolls prophecy and the curse of the hybrid eclipse. Aware of his role to protect Kate, he struggled to believe any of the stories were true. Thomas passed away that afternoon while Teddy was out chasing Kate. He could not believe Thomas was gone, that he had missed the chance to be with him during his last few breaths and say his final goodbyes. He felt helpless and began to draw within. He knew the only way he would ever be able to talk with Thomas again was to master the darkest of magic that required working with the dead. He was unaware that Kate had the ability to communicate with the dead. She was able to communicate with both the other world and the underworld, which was key in obtaining the guidance he would need to fulfill his destiny. Thomas's words echoed in his thoughts.
Love conquers all, my boy.
Referring to the Trade Scroll prophecy, Thomas knew Teddy's life would get darker before he saw the dawn. He left Teddy all of the information he had about Kate in his personal files. Despite Thomas's efforts to lessen the blow of his death, Teddy blamed himself for being preoccupied with Kate. He was now an open wound, with his emotions fluctuating all over the place and felt out of control. Teddy reached out to Claire for guidance with the prophecy.
I mean, how or why or what do I even do?
He almost pleads with her. She tells him,
You will know you're in the right place when you recognize how happy you are with her. When you are together, it will feel like time no longer exists. There will be a steady burning in your heart. I've seen this childlike puppy dog kind of love Teddy. It's pure and unconditional.
Teddy held out hope while gravitating toward the dark side of magic without any restraint. Thomas previously told him while teaching the way of the gods.
What will be, will be. The gods know better than you do, and sometimes you will have no other choice but to fight fire with fire.
As foretold in the Trade Scroll prophecy, Teddy would eventually have to face evil and contend with it in order to save Kate in the future. He tries to motivate himself to keep going by saying out loud,
I am the master of the universe.
Everything in Teddy's life was geared toward his role in the Trade Scroll prophecy. Thomas made sure he was well aware of it. Teddy equated his extensive knowledge of the Trade Scrolls with the accumulation of money, relentless in making sure he mastered how to obtain anything he wanted. His focus remained on power and pleasure. Teddy's early efforts to practice magic and use his spiritual gifts helped him forecast two pieces of key information. 1, he was indeed the master of the universe, and 2, poop. While looking into the Master Scroll, he saw a man hanging upside down, with poop falling into his mouth. He makes a funny face and laughs to himself.
That's odd.
As he continued to fine-tune his abilities, this vision of poop remained in the back of his mind. He was not far from learning about the source of the Master Scroll's power. The artifact reflected the thoughts and words of the reader, which gave valuable insight to their future. The insects designed the scrolls to account for both the ancient knowledge of the masters and the prosperity of trade. The masters were given the power to envision and shape reality in order to influence the markets and obtain unlimited resources. Teddy's energy stemmed back to Egypt, where the damned were hung upside down to eat their feces when they died. Teddy dabbled with dimensional magic long before and well after Thomas passed away. He mastered time-space manipulation through sacred geometry and gained an advantage in winning and mastering the gods' games. Like the insects, Teddy became more powerful than any of the gods. Tapping into Kate's world, he learned how she was being hidden and protected by her family. He familiarized himself with the ways of the gods from the underworld. He also began to study the ghouls and got comfortable in their evil ways. In his mind, he needed to become evil in order to learn how to control darkness and defeat it. A master at communications, he alternated between doing business in the corporate world of the gods and working a side hustle as a DJ at strip clubs in the red light district of the city. He was able to combine those worlds by entering the shadowy world of wrestling, where he was able to both create and control chaos. Teddy was technically connected to the master of the seas. He was gifted with the ability to use animals as vessels, like ravens, to be his eyes and ears to spy on multiple sources. Every day he grew stronger, and his powers became almost invincible. He learned to evade the consequences of his actions. Out of arrogance, he tapped himself as a contender to play a major role in the games created by the gods, beginning with the greatest games of baseball, then football, and basketball. He instantly became the driving force behind the games, a force that the gods desperately needed in order to keep their games going and their sense of power and control. His legacy of helping the gods since he was a child gave him a leg up when competing in the games. Teddy was finally given his shot to make moves on behalf of the gods on his 21st birthday and compete in his own trial. Some might say he played the game with a special kind of stupid. Like Kate, he needed to prove his god status, especially if he wanted to take over the game. Many tried before and failed. Many challenges were often given to the wannabe demigods, and those challenges were referred to as the trials of the sacred heartists. The playing ground for this trial took place on Earth, where all was fair in love and war. By the time Thomas was done with Teddy, he was an expert in war. However, he needed to find a balance of both love and war, and it was love that he secretly feared and seemed unable to master. The curse of the hybrid eclipse kept him from ever knowing true love until broken. Other trials by the gods took place in the underworld, beneath the Earth's surface, in rare places on Earth referred to as paradise or heaven, or the universe or space. The universe was a vast, dark place where the insects were able to bend time and space and manipulate dimensions to travel. Occasionally, the gods would call on the insects to do their will. The gods carried out most of their affairs on Earth, and occasionally they would enter the underworld and the otherworld. The otherworld was a dimension found on Earth, and the only way to access it was to cross through the underworld. Once a being died, they had to pass through the underworld in order to communicate with the living from the otherworld. Kate, being half-daughter of the gods of the underworld, was able to cross into those dimensions without dying. She had direct communications with the otherworld and was protected by many realms, to include the highest of them all. The insects gave her the ability to access all realms as instructed. As for normal people, when they witnessed strange events or spirits on Earth, they would either dismiss what they thought was some kind of fluke, or they spent the rest of their lives chasing what was referred to as the paranormal. The insects made it this way in order to cloak the divine in the eyes of the mortals as they went about living on Earth. The insects would make themselves known, but only when necessary. Due to major moves about to be made, the gods felt the need to distract Teddy from going toward Kate. The gods were extremely jealous of this connection. They did not want to lose their control and ability to play people in world events. It was like a grand game of chess, where they always won. However, Teddy was ready to find Kate, and since he could not get her to come to him, he decided he would go to her. The gods' world games being held in Paramount that year would be the perfect cover to get closer to her. Confident in his ability to command and control his environment, he was about to walk into Paramount, a place where control was an illusion.